Oh. Welcome to Storytime with Moog. I am Moog, and today we are reading Anna Karenina by Leo Tolstoy, starting with part one. No, no, I said that so aggressively too. Starting with part two, chapter one. But first, reading updates. I finished The Hunger Book by Agata Isabella Brewer, and I really liked it. It is a memoir about her mom and also about her experience living in communist Poland and becoming a U.S., you know, resident. Wow. Wow, we're struggling today. A US resident and being a parent and having these connections with food and her experience growing up and like the hard times with food and the ties to different types of food and how it is perceived differently, but then also how she is navigating her mother's anger and her mother's alcoholism and her mother's mental health and instability to like through adulthood. So like when she was little through adulthood. And it is just it's really good. It's really well written. It does a really good job of tying in research as well as personal experience and goes back and forth between past and present. And it's just, I like it. I like it. That's all I'm reading. I'm behind a book in my goals. I'm forever behind. And the reading app that I'm using is it just tells me every time. Every time I'm in there to like look at my stats or like put up like that I finished a book, it's like, all right, well, you're still behind what you should be. And it's like, I know. You don't have to tell me every time. I know. But today we're going to be reading Anna Karenina. We are starting with part two, chapter one. And what happened last time? Well, we got to follow Levin back home after the party, and he's back on his farm, and one of his cows had a little baby, and it's so cute. And he's just imagining his future and wanting a family and wanting a wife and all of these things. And he feels like he really missed out with Kitty being that wife. Although we as readers cannot imagine Kitty being on a farm. Like, she's not that type of girl. She is not going to do that. And we also follow Anna Karenina home, and she is just warring between her thoughts of remembering her time with her brother and also with Vronsky. And she's like, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, these thoughts that I'm having, like, he's just like invading all of her thoughts. They're very intrusive, and to the point where she's even like staring off into space and daydreaming while on the train. And then at one of the stops, she like gets up to get some fresh air, and look at that, who is on the same train as her, also getting air? Vronsky. And they have a very awkward, weird moment together where they say something about like they wouldn't change anything about the other person, something like that. So the break ends, they get back on the train, and then they make it to St. Petersburg, and Vronsky is like, I'm gonna find Anna. Like, I need like a little glimpse of her. I need like a little smile, like something. And he sees Anna with her husband and walks right up and is talking to both of them, but we all know that he's really talking to Anna and just like asking like if he's able to like call on them in the future. And we also, from Anna's perspective, have the reunion with her husband, and it's not great. You can tell that it is not an amazing marriage and that there is wedges there. And yeah, she's just like disappointed. Like she has that disappointed feeling, and she doesn't really want to be back home. And she has that same disappointed feeling when her son like greets her at the door of their house, and the image that she was like building up in her head while she was away of her son just became so grand that when she came back, it was like, oh, which is sad and terrible, and I don't like that. And let's see, what else? What else? I think that's mostly it, is like just getting the feeling of discontent from Anna at being at home. And so you're like, and just like little seedlings are being planted about what may come to pass. So, part 2, chapter 1. At the end of the winter, in the Shabbatskoy's house, a consultation was being held, which was to pronounce on the state of Kitty's health and the measures to be taken to restore her failing strength. She had been ill, and as spring came on, she grew worse. The family doctor gave her cod liver oil, then iron, then nitrate of silver, but as the first and the second and the third were alike in doing no good, and as his advice when spring came was to go abroad, a celebrated physician was called in. The celebrated physician, a very handsome man, still youngish, asked to examine the patient. He maintained, with peculiar satisfaction, it seemed, that maiden modesty is a mere relic of barbarism, and that nothing could be more natural than for a man still youngish to handle a young girl naked. He thought it natural because he did it every day, and felt and thought, as it seemed to him, no harm as he did it, and consequently he considered modesty in the girl not merely as a relic of barbarism, but also as an insult to himself. There was nothing for it but to submit, since although all the doctors had studied in the same school, had read the same books, and learned the same science, and though some people said this celebrated doctor was a bad doctor, in the princess's household and circle it was for some reason accepted that this celebrated doctor alone had some special knowledge, and that he alone could save Kitty. After a careful examination and sounding of the bewildered patient, dazed with shame, the celebrated doctor, having scrupulously washed his hands, was standing in the drawing-room talking to the prince. The prince frowned and coughed, listening to the doctor. As a man who had seen something of life, and neither a fool nor an invalid, he had no faith in medicine, and his heart was furious at the whole farce, specially as he was perhaps the only one who fully comprehended the cause of Kitty's illness. Conceited blockhead, he thought as he listened to the celebrated doctor's chatter about his daughter's symptoms. The doctor was, meantime, with difficulty restraining the expression of his contempt for this old gentleman, and with difficulty condescending to the level of his intelligence. He perceived that it was no good talking to the old man, and that the principal person in the house was the mother. Before her he decided to scatter his pearls. At that instant the princess came into the drawing-room with the family doctor. The prince withdrew, trying not to show how ridiculous he thought the whole performance. The princess was distracted, and did not know what to do. She felt she had sinned against Kitty. "Well, doctor, decide your fate," said the princess. "Tell me everything." "Is there hope?" she meant to say, but her lips quivered, and she could not utter the question. "Well, doctor?" "Immediately, princess. I will talk it over with my colleague, and then I will have the honor of laying my opinion before you." "And so we had better leave you?" "Yes, as you please." The princess went out with a sigh. When the doctors were left alone, the family doctor began timidly explaining his opinion, that there was a commencement of tuberculosis trouble, but... and so on. The celebrated doctor listened to him, and in the middle of his sentence looked at the big gold watch. "Yes," said he, "but..." The family doctor respectfully ceased in the middle of his observations. The commencement of the tuberculosis process we are not, as you are aware, able to define, till there are cavities. There is nothing definite, but we may suspect it, and there are indications: malnutrition, nervous excitability, and so on. The question stands thus: in the presence of indications of tuberculosis process, what is to be done to maintain nutrition? But there are always moral, spiritual causes at the back of these cases. Family doctor permitted himself to interpolate with a subtle smile. Yes, that's an understood thing, responded the celebrated physician, again glancing at his watch. Beg pardon, is the Yowski Bridge done yet, or shall I have to drive around? He asked. Ah, it is. Well then, I can do it in 20 minutes. So, we were saying the problem may be put thus: to maintain nutrition and to give tone to the nerves. The one is in close connection with the other. One must attack both sides at once. And how about a tour abroad? Asked the doctor. I've no liking for foreign tours, and take note, if there is an early stage of tuberculosis process, of which we cannot be certain, a foreign tour will be of no use. What is wanted is means of improving nutrition, and not for lowering it. And the celebrated doctor expounded his plan of treatment with sodden waters, a remedy obviously prescribed primarily on the ground that they could do no harm. The family doctor listened attentively and respectfully. But in favor of foreign travel, I would urge the change of habits, the removal from conditions calling up reminiscence. And then the mother wishes it, he added. Ah, well, in that case, to be sure, let them go. Only those German quacks are mischievous. They ought to be persuaded. Well, let them go then. He glanced once more at his watch. Oh, time's up already. And he went to the door. The celebrated doctor announced to the princess a feeling of what was due from him dictated his doing so, that he ought to see the patient once more. What? Another examination? Cried the mother with horror. Oh, no, only a few details, princess. Come this way. And the mother, occupied by the doctor, went into the drawing-room to Kitty, wasted and flushed, with a peculiar glitter in her eyes, left there by the agony of shame she had been put through. Kitty stood in the middle of the room. When the doctor came in, she flushed crimson, and her eyes filled with tears. All her illness and treatment struck her as a thing so stupid, ludicrous even. Doctoring her seemed to her as absurd as putting together the pieces of a broken vase. Her heart was broken. Why would they try to cure her with pills and powders? But she could not grieve her mother, especially as her mother considered herself to blame. May I trouble you to sit down, princess? The celebrated doctor said to her. He sat down with a smile, facing her, felt her pulse, and again began asking her tiresome questions. She answered him, and all at once got up, furious. Excuse me, doctor, but there is really no object in this. This is the third time you've asked me the same thing. The celebrated doctor did not take offense. Nervous irritability, he said to the princess, when Kitty had left the room. However, I had finished, and the doctor began scientifically explaining to the princess, as an exceptionally intelligent woman, the condition of the young princess, and concluded by insisting on the drinking of the waters, which were certainly harmless. At the question, should they go abroad, the doctor plunged into deep meditation as though resolving a weighty problem. Finally, his decision was pronounced. They were to go abroad, but to put no faith in foreign quacks, and to apply to him in any need. It seemed as though some piece of good fortune had come to pass after the doctor had gone. The mother was much more cheerful than when she went back to her daughter, and Kitty pretended to be more cheerful. She had often, almost always, to be pretending now. Really, I am quite well, mamma, But if you want to go abroad, let's go, she said, and trying to appear interested in the proposed tour, she began talking of the preparations for the journey. End of chapter 1. All right, so Kitty is not feeling great. And it's in reality because she feels heartbroken. So it's starting to come out in the form of like physical symptoms. And so there is a doctor there. He's younger and a celebrated doctor, so very, very smart, but younger than the usual doctors that they have, who are much older and have much more experience on the field and all of these things. And the king, or the prince, thinks that he just knows exactly what it is. Tuberculosis has been going around. That's probably what it is. And the young doctor's like, yeah, sure, but I don't really know. Like, and is kind of disinterested in talking to the prince and knows that he's going to get more, like he has more weight in when he talks to the princess, and so he's talking to her mostly. And before he leaves, he goes and examines Kitty once again, and Kitty is like, I've already seen you, like, you've been asking me the same questions, like, multiple times. My answer is not going to change. Which, between that and the note, the like little sentence of him being younger and how he views it as being very clinical and part of his job to see women who are about his age naked and vulnerable. It's just like, are you being gross? Like, why did that need to be stated twice? You know what I mean? Like, is something nefarious happening? But there's the question about going abroad, and the doctor doesn't really think that that should happen. He thinks that Kitty should stay home and be well nourished and get all of the nutrition that she needs, and you can't really do that when you're traveling. And Kitty is pretending to be okay, and there is a slight little like line that says it is something that she will continually be doing here on out, is pretending to be happier than she is. And so she's pretending in front of her mother like, oh, like I feel okay, like I will rally together, and if you want to go abroad, let's go abroad, let's talk about that. So chapter 2. Soon after the doctor, Dolly had arrived. She knew that there was to be a consultation that day, and though she was only just up after her confinement, she had another baby, a little girl, born at the end of winter. Though she had trouble and anxiety enough of her own, she had left her tiny baby and a sick child to come and hear Kitty's fate, which was to be decided that day. Well, well, she said, coming into the drawing room without taking off her hat. You're all in good spirits. Good news, then? They tried to tell her what the doctor had said, but it appeared that though the doctor had talked distinctly enough and at great length, it was utterly impossible to report what he had said. The only point of interest was that it was settled they should go abroad. Dolly could not help sighing. Her dearest friend, her sister, was going away, and her life was not a cheerful one. Her relations with Stepan Arkadyevitch after their reconciliation had become humiliating. The union Anna had cemented turned out to be of no solid character, and family harmony was breaking down again at the same point. There had been nothing definite, but Stepan Arkadyevitch was hardly ever at home. Money, too, was hardly ever forthcoming, and Dolly was continually tortured by suspicions of infidelity, which she tried to dismiss, dreading the agonies of jealousy she had been through already. The first onslaught of jealousy, once lived through, could never come back again, and even the discovery of infidelities could never now affect her as it had the first time. Such a discovery now would only mean breaking up family habits, and she let herself be deceived, despising him, and still more herself, for the weakness. Besides this, the care of her large family was a constant worry to her. First, the nursing of her young baby did not go well. Then, The nurse had gone away. Now one of the children had fallen ill. "Well, how are all of you?" asked her mother. "Oh, Mamma, we have plenty of troubles of our own. Lily is ill, and I'm afraid of it's scarlatina. I have come here now to hear about Kitty, and then I shall shut myself up entirely, if, God forbid, it should be scarlatina." The old prince, too, had come in from his study after the doctor's departure, and after presenting his cheek to Dolly and saying a few words to her, he turned to his wife. "How have you settled it? You're going? Well, and what do you mean to do with me?" "I suppose you had better stay here, Alexander," said his wife. "That's as you like." "Mamma, why shouldn't father come with us?" asked Kitty. "It would be nicer for him and for us, too." The old prince got up and stroked Kitty's hair. She lifted her head and looked at him with a forced smile. It always seemed to her that he understood her better than anyone in the family, though he did not say much about her. Being the youngest, she was her father's favorite, and she fancied that his love gave him insight. When now her glance met his blue, kindly eyes looking intently at her, it seemed to her that he saw right through her, and understood all that was not good that was passing within her. Reddening, she stretched out towards him, expecting a kiss, but he only patted her hair and said, "These stupid braids. There's no getting at the real daughter. One simply strokes the bristles of dead women. Well, Dolinka," he turned to his elder daughter, "what's your young buck about, eh?" "Nothing, father," answered Dolly, understanding that her husband was meant. "He's always out. I scarcely ever see him." She could not resist adding with a sarcastic smile, "Why hasn't he gone into the country yet? To see about selling that forest?" "No. He's still getting ready for that journey." "Oh, that's it," said the prince. "And so am I to be getting ready for our journey, too. At your service," he said to his wife, sitting down. "And I tell you what, Katya," he went on to his younger daughter, "you must wake up one fine day and say to yourself, 'Why, I'm quite well and merry, and going out again with father for an early morning walk in the frost.' Eh?" What her father said seemed simple enough. Yet at those words Kitty became confused and overcome, like a detected criminal. Yes, he sees it all. He understands it all, and in these words he's telling me that though I'm ashamed, I must get over my shame. She could not pluck up spirits to make an answer. She tried to begin, and all at once burst into tears, and rushed out of the room. "See what comes of your jokes." The princess pounced down on her husband. "You're always—" She began a string of reproaches. The prince listened to the princess's scolding rather a long while without speaking, but his face was more and more frowning. She was to be pitied, poor child, so much to be pitied, and you don't feel how it hurts her to hear the slightest reference to the cause of it. Ah, to be mistaken in people," said the princess, and by the change in her tone both Dolly and the prince knew she was speaking of Vronsky. "I don't know why there aren't laws against such base, dishonorable people." I can't bear to hear you," said the prince gloomily, getting up from his low chair and seeming anxious to get away, yet stopping at the doorway. "There are laws, madam, and since you've challenged me to it, I'll tell you who's to blame for it all. You. And you. You and nobody else. Laws against such young gallants there have always been, and there still are. Yes, if there has been nothing that ought not to have been. Old as I am, I'd have called him out of the barrier, the young dandy. Yes, and now you're psychic her, and call in these quacks." The prince apparently had plenty more to say, but as soon as the princess heard his tone she subsided at once, and became penitent, as she always did on serious occasions. Alexander, Alexander, she whispered, moving to him and beginning to weep. As soon as she began to cry, the prince, too calmed down, he went up to her. There, that's enough, that's enough. You're wretched too, I know. It can't be helped. There's no great harm done. God is merciful. Thanks, he said, not knowing what he was saying as he responded to the tearful kiss of the princess that he felt on his hand, and the prince went out of the room. Before this, as soon as Kitty went out of the room in tears, Dolly, with her motherly family instincts, had promptly perceived that here's a woman's work lay before her, and she prepared to do it. She took off her hat and, morally speaking, tucked up her sleeves and prepared for action. While her mother was attacking her father, she tried to restrain her mother, so far as filial reverence would allow. During the prince's outburst, she was silent. She felt ashamed for her mother, and tender towards her father for so quickly being kind again. But when her father left them, she made ready for what was the chief thing needful, to go to Kitty and console her. I've been meaning to tell you something for a long time, Mama. Did you know that Levin meant to make Kitty an offer when he was here the last time? He told Stiva so. Well, what then? I don't understand. So, did Kitty perhaps refuse him? She didn't tell you so. No, she has said nothing to me either of one or the other. She's too proud. But I know it's all on account of the other. Yes, but suppose she has refused Levin, and she wouldn't have refused him if it hadn't been for the other, I know. And then he has deceived her so horribly. It was too terrible for the princess to think how she had sinned against her daughter, and she broke out angrily. Oh, I really don't understand. Nowadays they will all go their own way, and mothers haven't a word to say in anything, and then... Mamma, I'll go up to her. Well, do. Did I tell you not to? Said her mother. End of chapter 2. Okay, so Dolly, who apparently just popped out another kid, she has 6 kids now, 6 alive kids now, and is still with her husband, even though she knows that he has cheated at least once and has suspicions of current more infidelity, not fidelity. That's the issue here. Infidelity. But she goes to see her sister Kitty because she knows that she is ill. And while she is there, we get like a little bit of tension between the parents and Kitty and Dolly. And yeah, and it's so funny that they talk about the doctor and what the doctor said, and they're like, but we don't really know exactly what the diagnosis is. And I feel like that's still sometimes true now when you go to the doctor and the doctor just like talks and you're just like, uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. And then you leave and you're like, so what am I doing? So what's wrong? What am I supposed to be doing? And I just think that's a little funny in like not a haha way. Um, and Dolly like pulls aside her mom, who is the princess, and is like, "Hey, did you know that Levin was going to propose to Kitty? Um, I know that was his intention while he was here, and I guess she refused him. Interesting, interesting. And Mama did know this, but didn't explicitly know this, and now realizes that she probably sabotaged her daughter's future of having a husband because she was pushing towards Vronsky, and so was like trying to wedge away Levin and Kitty so that Kitty could be with Vronsky, but Vronsky didn't actually ask, so now Kitty is all by herself, and so she kind of lashes out just a little bit and is like, well, I don't know, I don't understand anything. And then Dolly is now gonna go up and talk to Kitty. Yeah. Just nod and smile whilst your brain is overloaded. Exactly, exactly. I'm just supposed to eat an apple a day, correct? Chapter 3. When she went into Kitty's little room, a pretty pink little room full of knickknacks, as fresh and pink and white as Kitty herself had been 2 months ago, Dolly remembered how they had decorated the room the year before together with what love and gaiety. Her heart turned cold when she saw Kitty sitting on a low chair near the door, eyes fixed immovably on a corner of the rug. Kitty glanced at her sister, and the cold, rather ill-tempered expression of her face did not change. "I'm just going now, and I shall have to keep in, and you won't be able to come to see me," said Dolly, sitting down beside her. "I want to talk to you." "About what?" Kitty asked, swiftly, lifting her head in dismay. "What should it be but your trouble?" "I have no trouble." "Nonsense, Kitty. Do you suppose I could help knowing? I know all about it, and believe me, it's of so little consequence. We've all been through it." Kitty did not speak, and her face had a stern expression. "He's not worth your grieving over him," pursued Darya Alexandrovna, coming straight to the point. "No, because he has treated me with contempt," said Kitty in a breaking voice. "Don't talk of it, please. Don't talk of it." "But who can have told you so? No one has said that. I'm certain he was in love with you, and would still be in love with you if it hadn't— Oh, the most awful thing of it all for me is this sympathizing," shrieked Kitty, suddenly flying into a passion. She turned round on her chair, flushed crimson, and rapidly moving her fingers, pinched the clasp of her belt first with one hand and then the other. Dolly knew this trick her sister had of clenching her hands when she was much excited. She knew, too, that in moments of excitement Kitty was capable of forgetting herself and saying a great deal too much, and Dolly would have soothed her, but it was too late. "What? What is it you want to make me feel, huh?" said Kitty quickly. "That I've been in love with a man who didn't care a straw for me, and that I'm dying of love for him? And this is said to me by my own sister, who imagines that she's sympathizing with me. I don't want these condolences and humbug." "Kitty, you're unjust." "Why are you tormenting me?" "But quite the contrary. I see you're unhappy." But Kitty, in her fury, did not hear her. "I've nothing to grieve over and be comforted about. I am too proud ever to allow myself to care for a man who does not love me." "Yes, I don't say so either. Only one thing. Tell me the truth," said Darya Alexandrovna, taking her by the hand. "Tell me, did Levin speak to you?" Hmm. The mention of Levin's name seemed to deprive Kitty of the last vestige of self-control. She leaped up from her chair, and flinging her clasp on the ground, she gesticulated rapidly with her hands and said, "Why bring Levin in too? I can't understand what you want to torment me for. I've told you, and I say it again, that I have some pride, and never, never would I do as you are doing. Go back to a man who's deceived you, who has cared for another woman. I can't understand it. You may, but I can't." And saying these words, she glanced at her sister, and seeing that Dolly sat silent, her head mournfully bowed, Kitty, instead of running out of the room as she had meant to do, sat down near the door and hid her face in her handkerchief. The silence lasted for 2 minutes. Dolly was thinking of herself. That humiliation of which she was always conscious came back to her with a peculiar bitterness when her sister reminded her of it. She had not looked for such cruelty in her sister, and she was angry with her. But suddenly She heard the rustle of a skirt, and with it in the sound of heart-rending, smothered sobbing, and felt arms around her neck. Kitty was on her knees before her. "Dolinka, I am so, so wretched," she whispered penitently, and the sweet face covered with tears hid itself in Darya Alexandrovna's skirt, as though tears were the indispensable oil, without which the machinery of mutual confidence could not run smoothly between the two sisters. The sisters, after their tears, talked not of what was uppermost in their minds, but, though they talked of outside matters, they understood each other. Kitty knew that the words she had uttered in anger about her husband's infidelity and her humiliating position had cut her poor sister to the heart, but that she had forgiven her. Dolly, for her part, knew all she had wanted to find out. She felt certain that her surmises were correct, that Kitty's misery, her inconsolable misery, was due precisely to the fact that Levin had made her an offer and she had refused him, and Vronsky had deceived her, and that she was fully prepared to love Levin and to detest Vronsky. Kitty said not a word of that. She talked of nothing but her spiritual condition. "I have nothing to make me miserable," she said, getting calmer. "But can you understand that everything has become hateful, loathsome, coarse to me, and I myself most of all? You can't imagine what loathsome thoughts I have about everything." "Why, whatever loathsome thoughts can you have?" asked Dolly, smiling. "The most utterly loathsome and coarse. I can't tell you. It's not unhappiness or low spirits, but much worse. As though everything that was good in me was all hidden away, and nothing was left but the most loathsome. Come, how am I to tell you?" she went on, seeing the puzzled look in her sister's eyes. "Father began saying something to me just now. It seems to me he thinks all I want is to be married. Mother takes me to a ball. It seems to me she only takes me to get married off as soon as may be, and be rid of me. I know it's not the truth, but I can't drive away such thoughts. Eligible suitors, as they call them, I can't bear to see them. It seems to me they're taking stock of me and summing me up. In old days, to go anywhere in a ball dress was a simple joy to me. I admired myself. Now I feel ashamed and awkward. And then the doctor. Then—" Kitty hesitated. She wanted to say further that ever since this change had taken place in her, Stepan Arkadyevitch had become insufferably repulsive to her, and that she could not see him without the grossest and most hideous conceptions rising before her imagination. "Oh, well, everything presents itself to me in the coarsest, most loathsome light," she went on. "That's my illness. Perhaps it will pass off. But you mustn't think of it. I can't help it. I'm never happy except when the children at your home. What a pity you can't be with me. Oh, yes, I'm coming. I've had scarlatina, and I'll persuade Mamma to let me." Kitty insisted on having her way, and went to stay at her sister's and nursed the children all through the scarlatina, for scarlatina it turned out to be. The two sisters brought all the 6 children successfully through it. But Kitty was no better in health, and in Lent the Shabbatskoys went abroad. End of chapter 3. Okay, so Dolly is now talking to Kitty, and she is like, "Oh, did Levin talk to you? Because I know what happened." And Kitty is just like not furious, but just doesn't want the pity and doesn't want to like be looked at as somebody who needs to be coddled or anything like that. And she has been just going forward and knows that her dad wants, her to be married off as soon as possible, and her mom is taking her to the balls for these eligible suitors and not really asking like what Kitty wants. And so she is just having these realizations where she is not liking anything to do with being married, or that whole like courting dance that she has to go through or has been going through, and at the same time is also looking down on Dolly and despising that Dolly is able to still love and be with her husband who has had extramarital relations. So, oh, and she has scarlatina. And so they do go abroad during Lent season. I feel like this is the Russian Bridgerton. Yes. It takes place around the same time period. So it very much is. I was having that feeling a couple story times ago when they were like at the ball and they were like curtsying and like filling out the like dance card for people. Chapter 4. The highest Petersburg society is essentially one. In it, everyone knows everyone else. But this great set has its subdivisions. Anna Ar- Arkadievna. Oh man, first time saying it today, and I went in so confidently. Anna Arkadievna Karenina had friends and close ties in 3 different circles of this highest society. One circle was her husband's government official set, consisting of his colleagues and subordinates, brought together in the most various and capricious manner, and belonging to different social strata. Anna found it difficult now to recall the feeling of almost awe-stricken reverence which she had at first entertained for these persons. Now she knew all of them as people know one another in a country town. She knew their habits and weaknesses, and where the shoe pinched each one of them. She knew their relations with one another and with the head authorities, knew who was for whom, and how each one maintained his position, and where they agreed and disagreed. But the circle of political masculine interests had never interested her, in spite of Countess Lydia Ivanovna's influence, and she avoided it. Another little set with which Anna was in close relations was the one by means of which Alexei Alexandrovitch had made his career. The center of this circle was Countess Lydia Ivanovna. It was a set made up of elderly, ugly, benevolent, and godly women, and clever, learned, and ambitious men. One of the clever people belonging to the set had called it the conscience of Petersburg society. Alexei Alexandrovitch had the highest esteem for this circle, and Anna, with her special gift for getting on with everyone, had in the early days of her life in Petersburg made friends in this circle also. Now, since her return from Moscow, she had come to feel this set insufferable. It seemed to her that both she and all of them were insincere, and she felt so bored and ill at ease in that world that when she went to see the Countess Lydia Ivanovna as little as possible. The third circle with which Anna had ties was preeminently the fashionable world, the world of balls, of dinners, of sumptuous dresses, the world that hung onto the court with one hand so as to avoid sinking to the level of the demi-monde. For the demi-monde, the members of that fashionable world believed that they despised, though their tastes were not merely similar, but in fact identical. Her connection with this circle was kept up through Princess Betsy Tverskaya, her cousin's wife, who had an income of 120,000 rubles, and who had taken a great fancy to Anna ever since she first came out, showed her much attention, and drew her into her set, making fun of Countess Lydia Ivanovna's coterie. "When I'm old and ugly, I'll be the same," Betsy used to say, But for a pretty young woman like you, it's early days for that house of charity. Anna had at first avoided as far as she could Princess Verskaya's world, because it necessitated an expenditure beyond her means, and besides, in her heart she preferred the first circle. But since her visit to Moscow she had done quite the contrary. She avoided her serious-minded friends and went out into the fashionable world. There she met Vronsky, and experienced an agitating joy at those meetings. She met Vronsky especially out at Betsy's, for Betsy was a Vronsky by birth, and his cousin. Vronsky was everywhere where he had any chance of meeting Anna and speaking to her, when he could, of his love. She gave him no encouragement, but every time she met him there surged up in her heart that same feeling of quickened life that had come upon her that day in the railway carriage when she saw him for the first time. She was conscious herself that her delight sparkled in her eyes and curved her lips into a smile, and she could not quench the expression of this delight. At first, Anna sincerely believed that she was displeased with him for daring to pursue her. Soon after her return from Moscow, on arriving at a soirée where she had expected to meet him, and not finding him there, she realized distinctly from the rush of disappointment that she had been deceiving herself, and that this pursuit was not merely not distasteful to her, but that it made the whole interest of her life. The celebrated singer was singing for the second time, and all the fashionable world was in the theater. Vronsky, seeing his cousin from his stall in the front row, did not wait till the entr'acte, but went to her box. "Why didn't you come to dinner?" she said to him. "I marvel at the second sight of lovers," she added with a smile, so that no one but he could hear. "She wasn't there, but come after the opera." Vronsky looked inquiringly at her. She nodded. He thanked her by a smile, and sat down beside her. "But how I remember your jeers," continued Princess Betsy, who took a peculiar pleasure in following up this passion to a successful issue. "What's become of all that? You're caught, my dear boy." "That's my one desire, to be caught," answered Vronsky, with his serene, good-humored smile. "If I complain of anything, it's only that I'm not caught enough, to tell the truth. I begin to lose hope." "Why, whatever hope can you have?" said Betsy, offended on behalf of her friend. "Entre nous," and in her eyes there were gleams of light that betrayed that she understood perfectly and precisely as he did what hope he might have. "None whatever," said Vronsky, laughing and showing his even rows of teeth. "Excuse me," he added, taking an opera-glass out of her hand and proceeding to scrutinize, over her bare shoulder, the row of boxes facing them. "I'm afraid I've become ridiculous." He was very well aware that he ran no risk of being ridiculous in the eyes of Betsy or any other fashionable people. He was very well aware that in their eyes the position of an unsuccessful lover of a girl, or of any woman free to marry, might be ridiculous. But the position of a man pursuing a married woman, and, regardless of everything, staking his life on drawing her into adultery, has something fine and grand about it, and can never be ridiculous. So it was with a proud smile under his mustaches that he lowered the opera-glass and looked at his cousin. "But why was it you didn't come to dinner?" she said, admiring him. "I must tell you about that. I was busily employed, and doing what, do you suppose? I'll give you 100 guesses. 1,000. You'd never guess. I've been reconciling a husband with a man who'd insulted his wife. Yes, really. Well, did you succeed? Almost. You really must tell me about it, she said, getting up. Come to me in the next entr'acte. I can't. I'm going to the French theater. From Nilsson? Betsy queried in horror, though she could not herself have distinguished Nilsson's voice from any chorus girl's. Can't help it. I have an appointment there, all to do with my mission of peace. Blessed are the peacemakers. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven, said Betsy, vaguely recollecting she had heard some similar saying from someone. Very well, then, sit down and tell me what it's all about. And she sat down again. End of chapter 4. Okay, so chapter 4, we have just the sort of social cultural standings in Petersburg and how Anna is involved in 3 distinct circles that have some overlap, and how they are just seen as being upper crust and high and fancy and all of these things. And in those circles is also the overlap of Vronsky. And she has a favorite circle in which Vronsky is very much present. And one of her friends, Betsy, Princess Betsy Tverskaya, is related to Vronsky because, of course, she is. Everybody's related if they are not already trying to court each other. And is sort of like, well, where have you been? What are you doing? And has this like insider question. And he's like, oh, well, wouldn't you know it? I was doing this thing. And so they're about to go more into details, but he is talking about how what he is doing is not ridiculous and how these other things that men do are ridiculous, and how leading a woman away from her husband into adultery is the intention that he has. This isn't spoken out loud, it's just like his internal, we now know his motive, which we already knew his motive, but it is just clearly stated. Chapter 5. This is rather indiscreet, but it's so good it's an awful temptation to tell the story, said Vronsky, looking at her with his laughing eyes. I'm not going to mention any names. But I shall guess, so much the better. Well, listen. 2 festive young men were driving. Officers of your regiment, of course. I didn't say they were officers. 2 young men who have been lunching, in other words, drinking. Possibly. They were driving on their way to dinner with a friend in the most festive state of mind, and they beheld a pretty woman in a hired sledge. She overtakes them, looks round at them, and, so they fancy anyway, nods to them and laughs. They, of course, follow her. They gallop at full speed. To their amazement, the fair one alights at the entrance of the very house to which they were going. The fair one darts upstairs to the top story. They get a glimpse of red lips under a short veil, and exquisite little feet. You describe it with such feeling that I fancy you must be one of the 2. And after what you said just now, well, the young men go in to their comrades. He was giving a farewell dinner. There they certainly did drink a little too much, as one always does at farewell dinners, and at dinner they inquire who lives at the top of that house. No one knows, only their host's valet, in answer to their inquiry whether any young ladies are living on the top floor, answered that there were a great many of them about there. After dinner, the 2 young men go into their host's study and write a letter to the unknown fair one. They compose an ardent epistle, a declaration in fact, and they carry the letter upstairs themselves so as to elucidate whatever might appear not perfectly intangible in the letter. Why are you telling me these horrible stories? Well, they ring. A maidservant opens the door. They hand her the letter and assure the maid that they're both in love, that they'll die on the spot at the door. The maid, stupefied, carries in their message. All at once a gentleman appears with whiskers like sausages, as red as a lobster, announces that there is no one living in the flat except his wife, and sends them both about their business. How do you know he had whiskers like sausages, as you say? Ah, you shall hear. I've just been to make peace between them. Well, and what then? That's the most interesting part of the story. It appears that it's a happy couple, a government clerk and his lady. The government clerk lodges a complaint, and I became a mediator. And such a mediator! I assure you, Talleyrand couldn't hold a candle to me. Why, where was the difficulty? Ah, you shall hear. We apologize in due form. We are in despair. We entreat forgiveness for the unfortunate misunderstanding. The government clerk with the sausages begins to melt, but he, too, desires to express his sentiments, and as soon as ever he begins to express them, he begins to get hot and say nasty things, and again I'm obliged to trot out all my diplomatic talents. I allowed that their conduct was bad, but I urged him to take into consideration their heedlessness, their youth. Then, too, the young man had only just been lunching together, you understand. They regret it deeply and beg you to overlook their misbehavior. The government clerk was softened once more. I consent, Count, and am ready to overlook it, but you perceive that my wife's a respectable woman, has been exposed to the persecution and insults and effrontery of young upstarts, scoundrels. And you must understand, the young upstarts are present all the while, and I have to keep the peace between them. Again I call out all my diplomacy, and again, as soon as the thing was about at the end, our friend the government clerk gets hot and red, and his sausages stand on end with wrath, and once more I launch out into diplomatic wiles. Ah, he must tell you this story, said Betsy, laughing, to a lady who came into the box. He has been making me laugh so. Well, bon chance, she added, giving Vronsky one finger of the hand in which she held her fan, and with a shrug of her shoulders she twitched down the bodice of her gown that had worked up so as to be duly naked as she moved forward towards the footlights into the light of the gas and the sight of all eyes. Vronsky drove to the French theatre, where he really had to see the colonel of his regiment, who never missed a single performance there. He wanted to see him, to report on the result of his mediation, which had occupied and amused him for the last 3 days. Petritsky, whom he liked, was implicated in the affair, and the other culprit was a capital fellow and first-rate comrade who had lately joined the regiment, the young Prince Kedrov. And what was more important, the interests of the regiment were involved in it too. Both the young men were in Vronsky's company. The colonel of the regiment was waited upon by the government clerk, Vanden, with a complaint against his officers, who had insulted his wife. His young wife, so Vanden told the story, he had been married half a year, was at church with her mother, and suddenly overcome by indisposition arising from her interesting condition, she could not remain standing. She drove home in the first sledge, a smart-looking one she came across. On the spot, the officers set off in pursuit of her. She was alarmed, and feeling still more unwell, ran up the staircase home. Van Den himself, on returning from his office, heard a ring at their bell, and voices went out, and seeing the intoxicated officers went with a letter, he had turned them out. He asked for exemplary punishment. "Yes, it's all very well," said the colonel to Vronsky, whom he had invited to come and see him. "Petritsky's becoming impossible. Not a week goes by without some scandal. This government clerk won't let it drop. He'll go on with the thing." Vronsky saw all the thanklessness of the business, and that there could be no question of a duel in it. That everything must be done to soften the government clerk and hush the matter up. The colonel had called in Vronsky just because he knew him to be an honorable and intelligent man, and, more than all, a man who cared for the honor of the regiment. They talked it over, and decided that Petritsky and Kedrov must go with Vronsky to Venden's to apologize. The colonel and Vronsky were both fully aware that Vronsky's name and rank would be sure to contribute greatly to the softening of the injured husband's feelings. And these two influences were not, in fact, without effect, though the result remained, as Vronsky had described, uncertain. On reaching the French theater, Vronsky retired to the foyer with the colonel and reported to him his success or non-success. The colonel, thinking it all over, made up his mind not to pursue the matter further, but then, for his own satisfaction, proceeded to cross-examine Vronsky about his interview. And it was a long while before he could restrain his laughter, as Vronsky described how the government clerk, after subsiding for a while, could suddenly flare up again, as he recalled the details, and how Vronsky, at the last half-word of conciliation, skillfully maneuvered a retreat, shoved Petritsky out before him. "It's a disgraceful story, but killing. Kedrov really can't fight the gentleman. Was he so awfully hot?" he commented, laughing. "But what do you say to Claire today? She's marvelous," he went on, speaking of a new French actress. "However often you see her, every day she's different. It's only the French who can do that." End of chapter 5. All right, chapter 5. We have Vronsky telling the story about how he was a mediator between this officer who was trying to court this beautiful young woman that he saw, but found out that she is married, and the husband comes to the door and is just deeply upset that this officer tried to steal his wife away. And so Vronsky was in between, trying to mediate between the two things, and we get Petritsky involved, and it just becomes a whole thing. It just becomes a whole thing. But he's telling the story to his cousin Betsy all the while at a theater. So there's a lot going on, but at the same time, did anything really happen in this chapter? Not so much involving our direct main characters, but I feel like we might be getting more about Petritsky in the future because he has been mentioned before, but I guess we'll see. We'll see. Chapter 6. Let's do it. Princess Betsy drove home from the theater without waiting for the end of the last act. She had only just time to go into her dressing room, sprinkle her long, pale face with powder, rub it, set her dress to rights, and order tea in the big drawing room, when one after another carriages drove up to her huge house in Bolshaya Morskaya. Something like that. Her guests stepped out of the wide entrance, and the stout porter, who used to read the newspapers in the mornings behind the glass door to the edification of the passers-by, noiselessly opened the immense door, letting the visitors pass by him into the house. Almost at the same instant, the hostess, with freshly arranged coiffure and freshened face walked in at one door and her guests at the other door of the drawing room, a large room with dark walls, downy rugs, and a brightly lightened table, gleaming with the light of the candles, white cloth, silver samovar, and transparent china tea things. The hostess sat down at the table and took off her gloves. Chairs were set with the aid of footmen, moving almost imperceptibly about the room. The party settled itself, divided into two groups, one round the samovar near the hostess, the other at the opposite end of the drawing room, round the handsome wife of an ambassador in black velvet, with sharply defined black eyebrows. In both groups, conversations wavered, as it always does, for the first few minutes, broken up by meetings, greetings, offers of tea, and, as it were, feeling about for something to rest upon. She is exceptionally good as an actress. One can see she's studied Kaulbach, said a diplomatic attaché in the group round the ambassador's wife. Did you notice how she fell down? Oh, please, don't let us talk about Nilsson. No one can possibly say anything new about her, said a fat, red-faced, flaxen-headed lady, without eyebrows and chignon, wearing an old silk dress. This was Princess Myakaya, noted for her simplicity and the roughness of her manners, and nicknamed Enfant Terrible. Princess Myakaya, sitting in the middle between the two groups and listening to both, took part in the conversation first of one and then the other. 3 people have used that very phrase about Kaulbach to me today already, just as though they had made a compact about it, and I can't see why they liked that remark so. The conversation was cut short by this observation, and a new subject had to be thought of again. Do tell me something amusing, but not spiteful, said the ambassador's wife, a great proficient in the art of that elegant conversation called by the English small talk. She addressed the attaché, who was at a loss now what to begin upon. They say that that's a difficult task, that nothing's amusing that isn't spiteful, he began with a smile. But I'll try. Give me a subject. It all lies in the subject. If a subject's given me, it's easy to spin something round it. I often think that celebrated talkers of the last century would have found it difficult to talk cleverly now. Everything clever is so stale. That has been said long ago, the ambassador's wife interrupted him, laughing. The conversation began amiably, but just because it was too amiable, it came to a stop again. They had to have recourse to the sure, never-failing topic, gossip. Don't you think there's something Luishins of Tushkevich? He said, glancing towards a handsome, fair-haired young man standing at the table. Oh, yes. He's in the same style as the drawing room, and that's why it is he's so often here. This conversation was maintained, since it rested on allusions to what could not be talked of in that room, that is to say, of the relations of Tushkevich with their hostess. Round the samovar and the hostess, the conversation had been meanwhile vacillating in just the same way between 3 inevitable topics: the latest piece of public news, the theater, and scandal. It, too, came finally to rest on the last topic, that is, ill-natured gossip. Have you heard the Maltishteva woman, the mother, not the daughter, has ordered a costume in Diable Rose color? Nonsense, no, that's too lovely. I wonder, that with her sense, for she's not a fool, you know, that she doesn't see how funny she is. Everyone had something to say in censure or ridicule of the luckless Madame Maltishteva, and the conversation crackled merrily like a burning stack. The husband of Princess Betsy, a good-natured fat man, an ardent collector of engravings, hearing that his wife had visitors, came into the drawing-room before going to his club. Stepping noiselessly over the thick rugs, he went up to Princess Micaiah. "How did you like Nilsson?" he asked. "Oh, that you can steal upon anyone like that! How you startled me!" she responded. "Please don't talk to me about the opera. You know nothing about music. I'd better meet you on your own ground and talk about your majolica and engravings. Come now, what treasure have you been buying lately at the old curiosity shops?" "Would you like me to show you? But you don't understand such things." "Oh, do show me. I've been learning about them at those, what's their names, the bankers. They've some splendid engravings. They showed them to us." "Have you been at the Schutzburgs?" asked the hostess from the samovar. "Yes, ma chère. They asked my husband and me to dinner, and told us the sauce at the dinner cost £100, Princess Micaiah said, speaking loudly and unconscious everyone was listening. And very nasty sauce it was, some green mess. We had to ask them, and I made them sauce for 18 pence, and everybody was very much pleased with it. I can't run to £100 sauces." "She is unique," said the lady of the house. "Marvelous," said someone. The sensation produced by Princess Micaiah's speeches was always unique, and the secret of the sensation she produced lay in the fact that though she spoke not always appropriately, as now she said simple things with some sense in them. In the society in which she lived, such plain statements produced the effect of the wittiest epigram. Princess Micaiah could never see why it had that effect, but she knew it had, and took advantage of it. As everyone had been listening while Princess Micaiah spoke, and so the conversation around the ambassador's wife had dropped, Princess Betsy tried to bring the whole party together, and turned to the ambassador's wife. "Will you really not have tea? You should have come over here by us." "No, we're very happy here," the ambassador's wife responded with a smile, and she went on with the conversation that had been begun. It was a very agreeable conversation. They were criticizing the Karenin's husband and wife. "Anna is quite changed since her stay in Moscow. There's something strange about her," said her friend. "The great change is that she brought back with her the shadow of Alexei Vronsky," said the ambassador's wife. "Well, what of it? There's a fable of Grimm's about a man without a shadow, a man who's lost his shadow, and that's his punishment for something. I never could understand how it was a punishment, but a woman must dislike being without a shadow." "Yes, but women with a shadow usually come to a bad end," said Anna's friend. "Bad luck to your tongue," said Princess Micaiah suddenly. "Madame Karenina's a splendid woman. I don't like her husband, but I like her very much." "Oh, why don't you like her husband? He's such a remarkable man," said the ambassador's wife. "My husband says there are few statesmen like him in Europe." "And my husband tells me just the same, but I don't believe it," said Princess Micaiah. "If our husbands didn't talk to us, we should see the facts as they are. Alexei Alexandrovitch, to my thinking, is simply a fool. I say it in a whisper, but doesn't it really make everything clear? Before, when I was told to consider him clever, I kept looking for his ability and thought myself a fool for not seeing it. But directly I said, he's a fool, though only in a whisper. Everything's explained, isn't it? How spiteful you are today. Not a bit. I'd no other way out of it. One of the two had to be a fool, and, well, you know one can't say that of oneself. No one is satisfied with his fortune, and everyone is satisfied with his wit. The attaché repeated the French saying. That's just it. Just it. Princess Myakaya turned to him. But the point is that I won't abandon Anna to your mercies. She's so nice, so charming. How can she help it if they are all in love with her and follow her about like shadows? Oh, I had no idea of blaming her for it, Anna's friend said in self-defense. If no one follows us about like a shadow, there's no proof that we've any right to blame her. And having duly disposed of Anna's friend, the Princess Myakaya got up, and together with the ambassador's wife joined the group at the table, where the conversation was dealing with the King of Prussia. What wicked gossip you are talking over there, asked Betsy. About the Karenins. The princess gave us a sketch of Alexei and Alexandrovich, said the ambassador's wife with a smile, as she sat down at the table. Pity we didn't hear it, said Princess Betsy, glancing toward the door. Ah, here you are at last, she said, turning with a smile to Vronsky as he came in. Vronsky was not merely acquainted with all the persons whom he was meeting here. He saw them all every day. And so he came in with the quiet manner with which one enters a room full of people from whom one has only just parted. Where do I come from? He said, in answer to a question from the ambassador's wife. Well, there's no help for it, I must confess. From the opera. I do believe I've seen it 100 times, and always with fresh enjoyment. It's exquisite. I know it's disgraceful, but I go to sleep at the opera, and I sit out the opera bouffe to the last minute and enjoy it. This evening, he mentioned a French actress and was going to tell something about her. But the ambassador's wife, with playful horror, cut him short. Please, don't tell us about that horror. All right. I won't, especially as everyone knows those horrors. And we should all go to see them if it were accepted as the correct thing, like the opera, chimed in Princess Myakaya. End of chapter 6. Okay, chapter 6. Here we go. It is after the opera. Betsy is hosting a dinner with a bunch of people, and they are, they're having chatter, regular old chatter. And then all of a sudden, like, Anna's name comes up, the Kareninas, because there are 3 things that people talk about, and one of them is gossip. And so they're gossiping about both Anna and her husband. And it seems that the consensus is that Anna is well liked and her husband is not. And Anna shouldn't be with her husband, and she's changed since she's been back from Moscow, and things. Like, they know that something is going on, and they also know that they're not a good pairing, which is interesting that it's like a well-known thing. Chapter 7. Steps were heard at the door, and Princess Betsy, knowing it was Madame Karenina, glanced at Vronsky. He was looking towards the door, and his face wore a strange new expression. Joyfully, intently, and at the same time timidly, he gazed at the approaching figure and slowly rose to his feet. Anna walked into the drawing room, holding herself extremely erect, as always, looking straight before her, and moving with her swift, resolute, and light step that distinguished her from all other society women. She crossed the short space to her hostess, shook hands with her, smiled, and with the same smile looked round at Vronsky. Vronsky bowed low and pushed a chair up for her. She acknowledged this only by a slight nod, flushed a little, and frowned. But immediately, while rapidly greeting her acquaintances and shaking the hands proffered to her, she addressed Princess Betsy. "I have been to Countess Lydia's, and meant to have come here earlier, but I stayed on. Sir John was there. He's very interesting." "Oh, that's his missionary?" "Yes, he told us about the life in India. Most interesting things." The conversation, interrupted by her coming in, flickered up again like the light of a lamp being blown out. "Sir John! Yes, Sir John. I've seen him. He speaks well. The girl's quite in love with him." "And is it true the younger Vlasieva's girl's to marry Topov?" "Yes, they say it's quite a settled thing. I wonder at the parents. They say it's a marriage for love." "For love? What antediluvian notions you have. Can one talk of love in these days?" said the ambassador's wife. "What's to be done? It's a foolish old fashion that's kept up still," said Vronsky. So much the worse for those who keep up the fashion. The only happy marriages I know are marriages of prudence." "Yes, but then how often the happiness of these prudent marriages flies away like dust, just because that passion turns up that they have refused to recognize," said Vronsky. "But by marriages of prudence we mean those in which parties have sown their wild oats together. That's like scarlatina. One has to go through it and get over it. Then they ought to find out how to vaccinate for love, like smallpox." "I was in love in my young days with a deacon," said the Princess Myakaya. "I don't know what it did me any good." "No, I imagine, joking apart, that to know love one must make mistakes and then correct them," said Princess Betsy. "Even after marriage?" said the ambassador's wife playfully. "It's never too late to mend," the attaché repeated the English proverb. "Just so," Betsy agreed. "One must make mistakes and correct them. What do you think about it?" She turned to Anna, who, with a faintly perceptible resolute smile on her lips, was listening in silence to the conversation. "I think," said Anna, playing with the glove she had taken off, "I think of so many men, so many minds, certainly so many hearts, so many kinds of love." Vronsky was gazing at Anna, and with a fainting heart waiting for what she would say. He sighed, as after a danger escaped when she uttered these words. Anna suddenly turned to him. "Oh, I have a letter from Moscow. They write me that Kitty Shtcherbatskaya is very ill." "Really?" said Vronsky, knitting his brows. Anna looked sternly at him. "That doesn't interest you?" "On the contrary, it does, very much. What was it exactly they told you, if I may know?" he questioned. Anna got up and went to Betsy. "Give me a cup of tea," she said, standing at the table. While Betsy was pouring out the tea, Vronsky went up to Anna. "What is it they write to you?" he repeated. "I often think men have no understanding of what's not honorable, though they're always talking of it," said Anna without answering him. "I've wanted to tell you so a long while," she added, and moving a few steps away, she sat down at a table in a corner covered with albums. "I don't quite understand the meaning of your words," he said, handing her the cup. She glanced towards the sofa beside her, and he instantly sat down. Yes, I have been wanting to tell you, she said, not looking at him. You behaved wrongly. Very wrongly. Do you suppose I don't know that I've acted wrongly? But who was the cause of my doing so? What do you say that to me for? She said, glancing severely at him. You know what for. He answered boldly and joyfully, meeting her glance and not dropping his eyes. Not he, but she, was confused. That only shows you have no heart, she said. But her eyes said that she knew he had a heart, and that was why she was afraid of him. What you spoke of just now was a mistake, and not love. Remember that I have forbidden you to utter that word, that hateful word, said Anna with a shudder. But at once she felt that by that very word forbidden, she had shown that she acknowledged certain rights over him, and by that very fact was encouraging him to speak of love. I have long meant to tell you this, she went on, looking resolutely into his eyes and hot all over from the burning flush on her cheeks. I've come on purpose this evening, knowing I should meet you. I have come to tell you that this must end. I have never blushed before anyone, and you force me to feel to blame for something. He looked at her, and was struck by a new spiritual beauty in her face. What do you wish of me? He said, simply and seriously. I want you to go to Moscow and ask for Kitty's forgiveness, she said. You don't wish that? He asked. He saw she was saying what she forced herself to say, not what she wanted to say. If you love me, as you say, she whispered, do so that I may be at peace. His face grew radiant. Don't you know that you're all my life to me? But I know no peace, and I can't give it to you, all myself and love. Yes, I can't think of you and myself apart. You and I are one to me, and I see no chance before us of peace for me or for you. I see a chance of despair, of wretchedness, or I see a chance of bliss. What bliss? Can it be there's no chance of it? He murmured with his lips, but she heard. She strained every effort of her mind to say what ought to be said. But instead of that, she let her eyes rest on him, full of love, and made no answer. It's come, he thought in ecstasy, when I was beginning to despair, and it seemed there would be no end. It's come. She loves me. She owns it. Then do this for me. Never say such things to me, and let us be friends, she said in words, but her eyes spoke quite differently. Friends we shall never be. You know that yourself. Whether we shall be the happiest or the wretchedest of people, that's in your hands. She would have said something, but he interrupted her. I only ask one thing. I ask for the right to hope, to suffer as I do. But if even that cannot be done, command me to disappear, and I disappear. You shall not see me if my presence is distasteful to you. I don't want to drive you away, only don't change anything. Leave everything as it is, he said in a shaky voice. Here's your husband. At that instant, Alexei Alexandrovitch did in fact walk into the room with his calm, awkward gait. Glancing at his wife and Vronsky, he went up to the lady of the house, and sitting down for a cup of tea, began talking in his deliberate, always audible voice, in his habitual tone of banter, ridiculing someone. Your Rambouillet is in full conclave, he said, looking round at all the party. Your graces and the muses. But Princess Betsy could not endure that tone of his sneering, as she called it, using the English word, and like a skillful hostess, she at once brought him into a serious conversation on the subject of universal conscription. Alexei Alexandrovitch was immediately interested in the subject. and began seriously defending the new imperial decree against Princess Betsy, who had attacked it. Vronsky and Anna still sat at the little table. "This is getting indecorous," whispered one lady, with an expressive glance at Madame Karenina, Vronsky, and her husband. "What did I tell you?" said Anna's friend. But not only those ladies. Almost everyone in the room, even the Princess Myakaya and Betsy herself, looked several times in the direction of the two who had withdrawn from the general circle, as though that were a disturbing fact. Alexei Alexandrovitch was the only person who did not once look in that direction, and was not diverted from the interesting discussion he had entered upon. Noticing the disagreeable impression that was being made on everyone, Princess Betsy slipped someone else into her place to listen to Alexei Alexandrovitch, and went up to Anna. I'm always amazed at the clearness and precision of your husband's language," she said. "The most transcendental ideas seem to be within my grasp when he's speaking." "Oh, yes," said Anna, radiant with a smile of happiness, and not understanding a word of what Betsy had said. She crossed over to the big table and took part in the general conversation. Alexei Alexandrovitch, after staying half an hour, went up to his wife and suggested that they should go home together. But she answered, not looking at him, that she was staying to supper. Alexei Alexandrovitch made his bows and withdrew. The fat, old Tatar, Madame Karenina's coachman, was, with difficulty, holding one of her pair of greys, chilled with the cold and rearing at the entrance. A footman stood opening the carriage door. The hall porter stood holding open the great door of the house. Anna Arkadyevna, with her quick little hand, was unfastening the lace of her sleeve, caught in the hook of her fur cloak, and with bent head listening to the words Vronsky murmured as he escorted her down. "You've said nothing, of course, and I ask nothing," he was saying. "But you know that friendship's not what I want. That there's only one happiness in life for me. That word that you dislike so. Yes. Love." "Love," she repeated slowly, in an inner voice, and suddenly, at the very instant she unhooked the lace, she added, "Why I don't like the word is that it means too much to me. Far more than you can understand." And she glanced into his face. "Au revoir." She gave him her hand, and with her rapid, springy step, she passed by the porter and vanished into the carriage. Her glance, the touch of her hand, set him aflame. He kissed the palm of his hand where she had touched it, and went home, happy, in the sense that he had got nearer to the attainment of his aims that evening than during the last 2 months. End of chapter 7. Okay, chapter 7. Okay, so in chapter 6, we're at this place, at this dinner party, and they're all talking, and it like flows to the discussion of Anna and her husband. And who should appear in the very next chapter but Vronsky and Anna. And everybody there knows something is happening between them. The only person who doesn't see it is Anna's husband, because yes, he does show up, and he is just so involved in this conversation that he has not realized that Anna and Vronsky has pulled apart from the general group and are talking amongst themselves, and everybody else is just like noticing this. It's wild. And Anna's husband, Alexei, is only there for like 30 minutes, and then he goes up to his wife and he's like, "I'm ready to leave." And Anna's like, "I kind of want to stay for dinner." But the man has spoken what is spoken, and so that's how it goes. And then they part. And during the conversation between Vronsky and Anna, Vronsky is very much like, Anna, you are my everything. You are the air that I breathe. You are the water that I drink. You are the dreams of my day and my nighttime. I only ever think about you, and the only way that I know that we can both be happy is if we are together. There's no way that we can be friends. We're either together and we're happy, or we're apart and we're both miserable. And Anna is like, woe is me, don't you dare talk to me about such things, for I am married, and I don't like the word love because it just means so much to me. And it's brilliant. It's such good character writing and such good placement of discussions. And even though Vronsky and Alexei never like had an actual conversation in these couple chapters, you know, you know, you know all you need to know about them, about both of them. And it's so good. And on the parting of Vronsky and Anna, Vronsky is like, ah, yes, she has touched my hand. I shall never wash this hand. He didn't say that, but that's what I'm imagining is happening. And is just like, heck yeah, I made progress to getting a little bit closer to her being my gal. It's wild. Our dinner parties just places where people go to be uncomfortable and awkward, but with food. But also, there's food. So, that is the end of part 2, chapter 7, and that's where we're going to end tonight. But yes, thank you all so much for being here. It's a pleasure. As always, whether you lurk, whether you chat, I 1,000% appreciate you, and I 1,000% appreciate your support. If I don't see you next time, I hope to see you very soon. Bye.